I asked my parents when the family reunion was expecting to hear my mother's gentle voice, and maybe a reminder to bring potato salad like I had every summer. Instead, my brother Daniel answered, and the smugness in his tone made my stomach knot before he even spoke. "It was yesterday," he said too casually, too rehearsed. "Everyone came. We didn't think you needed to be there." The words didn't just sting, they carved into me like a blade. And while he spoke, my eyes fell on the framed photograph hanging just above my desk. Last year's reunion. In that picture, I was front and center holding a tray of burgers, hot off the grill, with little cousins clinging to me, my smile wide and proud. I had framed it because I believed it meant something proof that I was the glue holding this family together. Now, as Daniel's cruel laugh echoed through the phone, the photo mocked me. I imagined this year's photo the same pavilion, the same cousins, but a deliberate space where I used to stand. A gap that screamed louder than any words. In 30 seconds, my place in the family's story had been erased. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. Daniel chuckled low and mean as if he had been waiting for me to ask. "Oh, come on, Emily. Mom and Dad didn't want to tell you because they knew you'd overreact. But I figured you'd find out sooner or later. We had a great time. Everyone was there. Except you." I could hear voices in the background, laughter dishes clinking, as if the celebration hadn't ended but lingered on. I pictured my mother Margaret sitting at the picnic table under the oak trees, her sisters beside her. I pictured my father Robert leaning back with a beer in hand, smiling at Daniel. I pictured cousins chasing each other across the field. I pictured all of it without me. Did they even hesitate? Did anyone notice the empty space where I should have been? Or did Daniel fill it proudly, happy that I had finally been cut out both literally and figuratively? My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Why I finally managed to ask, though, the word cracked in my throat. Daniel's reply came too fast, too polished. "Because you make things difficult. You're always reminding people of what you've done, always trying to take credit. Honestly, it's embarrassing. You're not married, you don't have kids, you're just a school teacher. People whisper, Emily, you don't realize how awkward it is for mom and dad." His words detonated in my chest. My sacrifices, my independence, my very identity were twisted into flaws. The years I had carried this family, the thousands of dollars I had poured into keeping it together were now ammunition to shame me. "You can't mean that," I whispered. But deep down I knew he did. Daniel scoffed. "Believe what you want. But next year, don't bother asking." Then he hung up. The silence afterward was unbearable, so loud it drowned out my thoughts. My own reflection in the dark phone screen looked like a stranger's face. Wide eyes, pale skin, lips trembling. Tears welled, but I bit down hard, tasting blood, refusing to sob for someone who had just laughed while cutting me out of my own family. I turned toward my closet like a sleepwalker. On the top shelf was the floral dress I had bought 2 weeks earlier, planning to wear it to this year's reunion. A dress with soft yellow blossoms and a flowing hem, something cheerful for summer. I had even bought matching sandals, a frivolous splurge on my teacher's salary. The tags were still on. I pulled the dress down, pressing the fabric to my chest as though holding it could stop the ache inside me. That dress was no longer clothing. It was a gravestone, a marker of everything I had lost in a single phone call. They had gathered under the same sun, eaten the same food, laughed at the same jokes, and decided I was not worth a chair at the table. Not even a mention. I thought of all the years I had been the one sweating behind the grill running errands to Costco, staying up late to print photo collages that told the story of our family's history. I thought of the times I wrangled screaming toddlers so the adults could relax or scrubbed coolers long after everyone else had gone home. I had been the architect of those reunions, the invisible engine. And now I was erased. The betrayal was not an oversight, not a mistake. It was deliberate, and that made it 1,000 times worse. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Anger flickered under the grief, hot and relentless. This was not just sadness. It was rage, the kind that builds when years of sacrifice are spit back in your face. My parents had allowed this. Daniel had orchestrated it. And Emily Carter had been turned into a ghost in my own family's story. That photograph on the wall, the dress in my hands, the echo of Daniel's laugh, all of it fused into a single truth I could no longer avoid. This was the day my family told me without hesitation, "You are not one of us." And yet, beneath the crushing weight of that realization, another truth stirred faint but steady. If I was no longer one of them, then maybe, just maybe, I could finally learn who I was without them. The phone call with Daniel kept replaying in my mind like a cruel loop. But what hurt even more was the avalanche of memories that came after. I had always believed that my sacrifices meant something, that love was measured by effort, and I had poured every ounce of myself into holding this family together. Now, standing in my apartment with the unworn floral dress still draped over my arm, I realized I had spent years investing in a bond that was never real. The ledger of my sacrifices unfolded in my mind with painful clarity. At 18, when Daniel's tuition bill arrived, and my parents confessed they could not cover it, I was already juggling 2 part-time jobs along with community college. I remember the night my mother sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, whispering that Daniel's future was slipping away. Without thinking twice, I offered my savings. It was $12,000, then everything I had earned cleaning houses and tutoring neighborhood kids. Over the next 3 years, I added another $13,000, piecing it together from extra shifts and student loan refunds, until Daniel graduated debt-free, while I carried my own student debt like a chain. I told myself it was worth it. He was my brother. His success would be the family's pride. When my mother Margaret fell and fractured her leg, the hospital bills came to $7,500 after insurance. My father Robert shrugged helplessly, muttering about maxed out credit cards. I was 24, still paying off loans, but I signed the check. I ate ramen for months, skipped heating bills in the winter, wrapped myself in blankets just to keep the house warm enough to sleep. But I paid that hospital so she could walk again. Did she remember that when she sat at the reunion without me? I doubted it. A few years later, when my father's ancient desktop finally died, he grumbled about not being able to do his paperwork. I used my bonus check to buy him a brand new laptop for $1,200, the kind he bragged about to his friends. He thanked me once briefly, then told relatives later that Daniel had helped him pick it out. Daniel, who never lifted a finger. The injustice piled higher every year. And then there were the reunions themselves. 25 summers of barbecues, card games, softball tournaments, water balloon fights under the sun. Who kept them alive? Me. When the family suggested canceling one year because no one wanted to organize it, I was 20 and broke, but I volunteered. I spent $500 on food, another $200 on decorations and supplies. Every year after that, I covered the gap when others promised to contribute but never did. $800 here, $600 there. Some years, I maxed out my credit card just to make sure there would be enough tables, enough burgers, enough soda for the kids. I planned the games, printed the photo albums, scrubbed coolers until my hands cracked. People laughed, ate, enjoyed. They clapped Daniel on the back for showing up late with nothing but a grin, while I sweated behind the grill. If love is measured in dollars, my family had received more than $45,000 of mine in 12 years. $45,000 I could have used to pay down my student loans, to travel, to buy a reliable car, to maybe start a future of my own. Instead, I fed them, clothed them, educated them, healed them. And how did they repay me? By cutting me out without hesitation. The betrayal deepened when I thought of the conversations I had overheard at past reunions. Relatives praising Daniel for his ambition while I carried platters past their chairs. Aunt Carol once said, "Daniel will take care of this family. One day you'll see." I bit my tongue, my hands red from hauling bags of ice, wondering if they even noticed who was doing the work. Daniel had always been the golden child. He was the firstborn son, tall, charming when he wanted to be, with just enough charisma to cover his laziness. My parents adored him, forgave him everything, celebrated his smallest achievements. When he barely graduated high school, they threw a party. When I graduated with honors while working 2 jobs, they barely mentioned it. I used to believe favoritism was normal, that it was my duty as the younger child to support him. But now, I saw the truth. I had been conditioned to give and give until there was nothing left. They had accepted my sacrifices as if they were owed. The imbalance was staggering. My life choices had been mocked too. Just a teacher, Daniel sneered on the phone. I thought back to all the times relatives asked at reunions if I was dating anyone, when I would get married, when I would have children. My career, my independence, my passion for teaching young minds, none of it mattered. In their eyes, I was incomplete, and now apparently unworthy of even being present. One memory rose sharper than the rest. 3 summers ago, the family reunion nearly collapsed because the park pavilion had been double booked. The other group was ready to fight for the space. Everyone panicked, voices rising. Daniel was nowhere to be found, probably flirting with someone by the lake. It was me who calmly negotiated with the park manager, offered an extra fee from my own pocket, and secured the pavilion. That night, my cousins toasted Daniel for being such a leader, convinced he had handled it. He smirked and said nothing. I swallowed the bitterness and smiled because I believed being invisible was better than letting the family fall apart. Now I understood. I had been invisible all along except when they needed my money, my labor, my silence. The total of my sacrifices haunted me: 25,000 for Daniel's tuition, 7,500 for Mom's leg, 1,200 for Dad's laptop, 3,000 spread across holiday gifts, 8,000 in reunion expenses, 2,000 more for emergencies like car repairs and medical bills. Over $45,000 drained from a teacher's salary, from late nights grading papers, from canceled vacations, from postponed dreams. And what did I have to show for it? An empty closet with a dress that would never be worn, a wall with a photo that now mocked me, a heart hollowed out by betrayal. I remembered my father once telling me, "Family is everything, Emily. Money comes and goes, but family is forever." I had believed him. I had lived by those words. I had sacrificed everything because I thought it would secure my place in that forever. But forever had ended with a phone call. They had drawn a line and placed me on the outside. And worst of all, they hadn't even flinched. For 3 days after that phone call, I drifted like a ghost, moving through the halls of the elementary school where I taught as if my body was present, but my soul had been left behind. I smiled at my students, graded their spelling tests, nodded at colleagues in the teacher's lounge, but inside I was unraveling. At night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying Daniel's words until they tattooed themselves across my brain. "You're not needed. You're embarrassing. You're just a school teacher." Each insult echoed louder in the dark. On the fourth evening, as I tried to lose myself in lesson planning, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Mom. For a second, I hesitated, thinking maybe she was calling to apologize, maybe to offer some explanation, some sliver of regret. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was rushed, distracted. "Emily, honey, I need you to transfer $600 by Friday. Daniel's car payment is late again, and the bank is threatening repossession. He's so stressed." You know how he gets. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. $600. After everything. After being excluded, humiliated, erased, she had the audacity to ask for money as if nothing had happened. My grip on the phone tightened until I thought it would crack. "Mom," I said slowly, measuring each word, "are you seriously calling me for Daniel's car payment?" There was a pause, then a sigh as though I were the unreasonable one. "Sweetheart, you've always been the responsible one. You know Daniel struggles, you're stable, you're good with money. It's just this once. Just this once." I almost laughed. Just this once had been every month, every crisis, every reunion, every emergency for 12 years. Just this once had drained $45,000 from my life. My throat burned as anger surged through me, hotter than I had ever felt. The betrayal of the reunion was still fresh, raw bleeding. And now they wanted me to clean up Daniel's mess again, like my humiliation had never happened. Something inside me cracked, and what poured out was not weakness, but fire. "Mom," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Didn't Daniel tell me I wasn't needed? Didn't he say I was an embarrassment? Didn't you all have a reunion without me?" Her silence was telling, heavy, guilty. I pushed harder. Well, if I'm not needed, then my money isn't needed either. For the first time in my life, I heard my mother gasp at my refusal. Genuine shock. Emily, don't be dramatic. Family helps family. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Family helps family. Where was that help when I worked 2 jobs to pay Daniel's tuition? Where was that help when I drained my savings for your hospital bills? Where was that help when I maxed out credit cards to keep our reunions alive? You had your reunion without me. You told me I wasn't family enough to be invited. So, no, Mom. This time I won't be sending a dime. My voice trembled, but not from fear, from release. From finally speaking the words I had buried for years. On the other end, Mom sputtered. Emily, you don't mean that. Daniel will lose his car. Then he can take the bus, I snapped, surprising even myself with the steel in my tone. Or maybe he can sell something, get another job, or figure it out like the rest of us. Because I am done being his safety net. I am done being yours. You made your choice when you cut me out, and now I'm making mine. I hung up before she could respond. My hands shook violently as I set the phone down. But for the first time in years, I wasn't shaking from fear or guilt. I was shaking from power, from anger unleashed, but also from clarity. I sat at the edge of my bed, my breath coming fast, my pulse pounding. The floral dress still lay crumpled in the corner where I had thrown it days ago. I stared at it, and instead of tears, a strange calm washed over me. That dress would never see the light of a reunion, but maybe that was the point. Maybe it was a tombstone for the old Emily. The Emily who sacrificed until she was empty, who stayed silent while her brother was crowned king, who believed family meant unconditional servitude. That Emily had died with that phone call. The Emily sitting on the bed now was someone new. Someone who had just told her mother no. Someone who had finally stopped begging for scraps of love paid for in dollars. In that moment, I realized I had reached the turning point of my life. My family might still see me as an ATM with feelings, but I would no longer play the role. They had erased me, but in doing so, they had freed me. After that night, something inside me shifted. The fear that had always kept me compliant was gone, replaced by a low simmering fire that refused to be extinguished. For a week, I ignored my phone, letting Daniel's texts pile up unread, watching my mother's calls go unanswered. I poured my energy into my students, into lesson plans, into anything that wasn't them. But silence is a dangerous weapon, and mine did not go unnoticed. By the second week, the storm hit. Daniel showed up outside my apartment one Saturday morning, leaning against his shiny black SUV, the one I had once helped him cover payments for the same car he was now begging me to save. He looked polished, smug as ever, but there was a tension in his jaw. My parents were with him. My mother's eyes darted nervously. My father's mouth set in a grim line. I stepped outside, arms crossed, bracing myself. Emily Daniel began, his voice carrying that patronizing tone he always used when he thought he was in control. We need to talk. You've been acting unstable. The word sent a chill through me. Unstable. It wasn't a casual insult, it was calculated. My mother chimed in, wringing her hands. Honey, we're worried about you. You cut off contact, you refuse to help. That's not like you. Maybe you need some guidance, some protection just until you're better. I stared at her, incredulous. Better? Better than what? Better than finally standing up for myself. My father stepped forward, holding out a folder of papers. Emily, this is just temporary. Daniel found a lawyer who prepared these documents. A power of attorney. It will help manage things. Take the burden off you. My blood ran cold. Power of attorney. They wanted control of my accounts, my decisions, my life. Are you insane? I hissed. You're asking me to hand over my independence to the same people who excluded me from the reunion, to the brother who treats me like a walking bank. Daniel smirked, his mask slipping just enough to reveal the predator underneath. Look, Em, it's not like you've done so well on your own. You're single, you're drowning in work, you don't have kids. What exactly are you building? At least this way your money goes where it should, back into the family. Rage surged so violently I thought I might scream. But then I caught sight of Mrs. Thompson, my elderly neighbor, peeking from her window across the courtyard. Her presence anchored me. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. No, I said, my voice sharp as steel. I'm not signing anything. Not now, not ever. Daniel's smile faltered. My mother's lips trembled. My father tried again, his voice low, persuasive. Emily, listen. Families sometimes have to make hard choices. You're not yourself lately. The reunions, the anger, the refusal to help, it's concerning. If you don't cooperate, people will start to think you're not well. And there it was, the threat. If I didn't hand them control, they would smear me as unstable, crazy, unfit. My career as a teacher depended on my reputation. Rumors of instability could end me. I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. But then I remembered the years of sacrifice, the photo mocking me on the wall, the dress lying unworn. I straightened my shoulders. If you think you can bully me into giving up my autonomy, you're wrong. Get off my porch. Daniel's eyes darkened. You'll regret this. When Mom and Dad change the will when the family cuts you out completely, don't come crying to us. He turned sharply, the SUV door slamming like a gunshot. My parents followed, both casting me looks of disappointment, as though I were the betrayer. When the car roared away, I sank against the doorframe, trembling, not from weakness this time, but from fury. They weren't content with excluding me. They wanted to strip me of everything, my finances, my dignity, my future. And worst of all, they were willing to weaponize my mental health, to paint me as unfit, just to keep Daniel comfortable. Over the next week, the rumors began. A colleague at school asked gently if I was doing okay at home, saying she had heard from a friend of a friend that I was under a lot of stress. Another neighbor mentioned my parents had been by talking about my episodes. Episodes! The word spread like poison. Each whisper was a trap laid by Daniel. He knew exactly where to strike. If the Board of Education believed I was unstable, my job was at risk. If parents lost faith in me, my career could collapse. The escalation was no longer about money. It was about control. Daniel was playing for everything. I started documenting everything, every text, every voicemail, every rumor. I wrote down dates, times, exact words. At night, I lay awake imagining the worst. Daniel convincing my parents to declare me incompetent, to take legal control to ruin me. But even in the darkest hours, one truth burned steady. I would not let them win. Not this time. They had underestimated me. They thought I was still the compliant sister who sacrificed silently. But they had created someone new, someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And I would fight. When the walls feel like they're closing in, the smallest crack of light can save you. For me, that light came in the form of people I never expected. Aunt Linda was the first. She called me one evening after hearing whispers of my so-called episodes. Her voice was calm, steady, a rope thrown into quicksand. Emily, it's Linda. I know what they're saying. Don't believe a word. I went through this too. I nearly dropped the phone. But you've always been the strong one. She laughed softly, bitterly. Strength doesn't protect you from jealousy or greed. Years ago, when I refused to bail your uncle out of debt, the family painted me as selfish, even unstable. They cut me out of gatherings for years, but guess what? I survived. And you will, too. Her words wrapped around me like armor. For the first time since the reunion betrayal, I felt less alone. Linda promised to stand by me to testify if needed to remind the family that sacrifice is not a weakness, but a form of love. Then came James Miller, a lawyer I had met years earlier at a community fundraiser. He was an old friend of my father's, but unlike my father James, had integrity. I called him after Daniel's visit with the power of attorney papers, my hands shaking as I explained everything. James listened without interrupting, then said firmly, Emily, what they're attempting falls under financial coercion. If they push it further, it edges into elder or dependent adult abuse. You're not elderly, but the tactics are the same. Intimidation, defamation, manipulation. They're trying to corner you into surrendering your autonomy. I exhaled shakily. What can I do? Document everything. Keep every text, every voicemail, every rumor. and Emily never meet them alone again. If they want to talk, tell them to go through me. I'll be your wall." His words steadied me. For once, the law wasn't just a weapon they could use against me. It could be my shield. At school, I found another unexpected ally in Sarah, my fellow teacher and friend. She had seen me come in pale and shaken after my parents' surprise visit. When I finally confessed the whole mess, her eyes flared with indignation. "Emily, that's abuse. Plain and simple. You've carried them for years, and now they want to crush you for saying no. That's not family. That's exploitation." She didn't just offer sympathy, she offered action. "I'll write a statement if it comes to that. I've seen you. You're stable, competent, one of the best teachers here. If anyone tries to claim otherwise, they'll have to go through me and half the staff." Her loyalty made my throat tighten. These weren't just allies. They were proof that I was not the problem. The family had tried to twist the narrative, but truth has witnesses too. The strongest ally of all, though, was someone I had barely known, Mrs. Thompson, my 70-year-old neighbor. One evening, she knocked on my door carrying a plate of cookies. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes sharp. "I couldn't help overhearing when your brother came by with your parents. The words he used, I've heard them before." I invited her in, curiosity battling exhaustion. She sat at my kitchen table, folding her hands neatly. "My own children tried to do the same to me 5 years ago. They wanted my house, my savings. They told neighbors I was confused, unstable, that I couldn't manage on my own. Do you know what stopped them? Documentation, witnesses, and the fact that I finally said no." My breath caught. It was as if she had lived my life in another chapter. "How did you bear it?" I asked. Her expression softened. "I realized something important. Family is not defined by who shares your blood, but by who respects your boundaries. Sometimes the people you give the most to are the ones who see you the least. But when you stand your ground, you'll find others who see you clearly. Those are your true family." Tears blurred my vision. For years, I had begged for scraps of recognition from people who never saw me. And here was a woman who barely knew me but understood me completely. By the end of that night, I had 4 allies: Linda with her experience, James with his legal shield, Sarah with her professional testimony, and Mrs. Thompson with her wisdom. Together, they formed a circle around me, not of obligation but of choice. The irony struck me hard. My blood family had exiled me, but in their place rose a chosen family, stronger, steadier, more real. The next morning, I spread out all my collected evidence on the kitchen table: printed texts, recorded voicemails, written notes of conversations, even the financial records of what I had spent over the years. Linda called to check in. James reviewed the documents. Sarah promised to start gathering colleagues willing to vouch for me. And Mrs. Thompson told me she would attend any hearing if it came to that. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a soldier preparing for war. And for once, I wasn't fighting alone. Thanksgiving has always been the crown jewel of our family gatherings. The turkey, the pies, the endless parade of side dishes, the laughter spilling from the dining room into the living room, the football game buzzing in the background. For years, I had been the one who cooked, cleaned, set the table, and made sure every tradition was carried out. This year, I was supposed to be invisible, erased like the reunion, but fate had other plans. Aunt Linda called me the week before. "They're planning something," she warned. I overheard Margaret telling Carol that Robert and Daniel are going to announce changes to the will. "They're bringing a lawyer to dinner. Emily, you need to be there." My stomach twisted. The will. It was not enough for them to exclude me. They wanted to lock me out of the future too, to enshrine my erasure in ink and paper. Linda's voice sharpened. "If you don't show up, you'll have no defense. They'll spin the story and make you look ungrateful, unstable. But if you come prepared, you can expose them." That night, I sat at my table staring at the piles of documents James and I had assembled: receipts, bank transfers, text messages, photographs. I opened my laptop and pulled up the slideshow I had been building in secret. For years, I had saved photos from reunions, scanning old prints, curating memories. Now I turned them into a weapon. Each photo showed me at the center, hauling coolers, grilling burgers, entertaining cousins, holding the family together, while Daniel lounged in the background. This time, the story would be undeniable. When Thanksgiving Day came, I dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue blouse and black slacks. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be twisted into vanity. I wanted dignity. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to stand taller than any accusation. James met me outside the Carter house, his leather briefcase in hand, his jaw tight. "You ready?" he asked. My knees trembled, but my voice was steady. "I've been ready for years." Inside the house was thick with the smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon pies. Relatives filled the room's laughter, mingling with the clink of silverware. My mother's smile froze when she saw me. "Emily," she said sharply, "we weren't expecting you." "I know," I replied evenly, "but I thought Thanksgiving was about family. Unless I'm not family anymore." The room went silent. Forks paused midair. Daniel rose from his seat at the head of the table wearing a suit, as though this was a business meeting rather than a holiday. Beside him stood a man in a gray suit briefcase, at his feet the lawyer Aunt Linda had warned me about. Daniel forced a smile. "Everyone, let's stay calm. Emily's obviously emotional, but since she's here, we might as well proceed. Mom, Dad, why don't you explain?" My father cleared his throat. "We've decided to make some adjustments to the estate planning. Daniel will be taking more responsibility. It's only practical. He has a family to support while Emily—" He trailed off, glancing at me with something between pity and disdain. "Emily has her work." My heart thudded, but I held my ground. "Interesting," I said, pulling out my laptop, "because I happen to have a few things to show everyone. If this is going to be about who has been responsible, who has supported this family, then let's look at the evidence." I connected the laptop to the television in the living room, the one that usually played the football game. The first slide appeared a photo of me at 18, standing at a grill, sweat dripping down my face, cooking for 40 relatives. That year, I narrated, my voice clear. I spent $600 on food because no one else stepped up. The next slide, me carrying cases of soda into the pavilion. The next year, I maxed out my card to make sure we had enough for everyone. Slide after slide flickered across the screen, each one a silent witness to my sacrifices. My cousins shifted uncomfortably. My aunts avoided my eyes. The slideshow moved to receipts, bank transfers, itemized lists totaling over $45,000. Then came the photos of Daniel leaning back in a chair with a beer, arriving late, with nothing in his hands, smiling while others worked. The contrast was undeniable. Murmurs rippled through the room. Daniel's face reddened. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're just trying to make yourself look like a martyr. Nobody asked you to do those things." My voice hardened. "No, Daniel, you didn't ask. You demanded in silence, through entitlement, through every smug smile when I picked up the slack. And now you want to erase me from the will because I stopped paying your bills." The lawyer stepped forward, trying to restore order. "Mrs. Carter." "Mr. Carter, perhaps we should move this discussion elsewhere." But Aunt Linda's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "No, let her speak. For once, let Emily be heard." I turned back to the crowd, my heart pounding. This family erased me from the reunion, called me embarrassing, unworthy. But for 20 years, I have been the one holding you together. Every dollar, every hour, every ounce of energy, I gave it to you. And in return, I was thrown away. My mother's lips trembled, but she said nothing. My father looked at the floor. Daniel exploded. "Of course we excluded you. You're not family anymore. You're just a wallet." The room gasped. His words hung in the air, damning and undeniable. My hands shook, but not with fear, with triumph. The mask had slipped. He had confessed the truth I had known all along. James stepped forward, his voice calm, but cutting. "You all heard that. My client has been financially exploited for years. If this family intends to continue down this path, we will pursue legal action." My cousins whispered among themselves, some glaring at Daniel, others avoiding eye contact altogether. The lawyer in the gray suit looked flustered, gathering his papers quickly. The power shift was palpable. For once, I was not the invisible one. For once, the truth was louder than the lies. I closed the laptop, the silence thick. "I'm done," I said simply. Done funding, done cleaning, done begging for love I never received. If I'm not family enough for the reunion, then I'm not family enough to pay your bills. I turned to leave, my legs trembling, but my spine straight. Behind me, voices erupted, Daniel shouting, my mother crying, my father calling my name. But I didn't stop. I walked out the door into the cold November air, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. They had tried to erase me. Instead, I had exposed them. The door closed behind me with a heavy thud, muffling the chaos still spilling from the dining room. For a moment, I just stood on the porch, breathing in the icy November air, letting it freeze the tears threatening to fall. My heart pounded. My legs shook. But the overwhelming sensation was not fear. It was release. The chains I had worn for years had shattered in that house, in front of witnesses who could no longer deny the truth. Daniel's words, "You're just a wallet," still echoed in my ears. But instead of piercing me, they hardened me. He had finally spoken the truth, and in doing so, he had destroyed his own mask. Aunt Linda slipped outside a few minutes later, her coat wrapped tight around her shoulders. "You were brilliant," she whispered fiercely. "Don't doubt yourself, Emily." Everyone heard him. They can't unhear it. Her hug was warm, steadying. "This fight isn't over, but tonight you turn the tide." James joined us by the car, his briefcase still in hand. "We'll file for legal protection. Any attempt to coerce you further, any smear campaign will respond. You're not alone in this anymore." For the first time in weeks, I believed him. As we drove away, I glanced back once. Through the window, I saw Daniel pounding the table red-faced while my parents tried to calm him. The sight should have broken me. Instead, it clarified everything. That house was no longer my home. Those people were no longer my family in anything but blood. Over the next days, the silence was deafening. No calls, no texts, no knocks at my door. Daniel had burned his bridge in public, and the family was too ashamed or too divided to reach out. Sarah at school beamed when I told her what happened. "You exposed them, Em. You showed them who you are. That's power." Mrs. Thompson brought me a pie and squeezed my hand. Sometimes the cleanest cut is the deepest one. It hurts at first, but it heals straight. I began to notice something unexpected. My apartment felt lighter. My meals tasted richer. Even grading papers felt less like a chore and more like a purpose. The constant weight of obligation was gone, and in its absence, I found space for myself. One Saturday morning, I took the floral dress from my closet, the one that had symbolized betrayal. I carried it to a thrift store downtown and donated it. As I handed it over, I whispered, "Let someone else give you meaning." Walking out, I felt 10 pounds lighter. That night, I sat with Aunt Linda and Mrs. Thompson at a small diner, steam rising from our coffee cups. We laughed, we shared stories, we planned a holiday gathering, not a family reunion, but a gathering of choice. Friendsgiving, Sarah called it when I told her. Count me in. The circle was small, but it was real. And it was mine. For once, I didn't measure my worth in dollars given or sacrifices made. I measured it in respect received and love freely offered. I knew Daniel would not stop easily. There would be more attempts, more schemes. But I also knew I had allies' evidence and strength I had never tapped before. They could smear my name, but they could no longer control me. They had tried to strip me of dignity, but I had reclaimed it in front of everyone who mattered. As December approached and the world outside glittered with holiday lights, I allowed myself to dream of a different kind of future, one where I traveled not to bail someone out, but to explore, where my money paid for my joy, where my home was filled not with resentment, but with laughter I chose. The war with my family was not finished, but the battle at Thanksgiving had given me the most important victory of all, the right to define my own worth. Winter settled over the city like a heavy quilt snow, gathering on rooftops, streetlights glowing against early darkness. For the first time in years, I didn't dread the season. I wasn't weighed down by credit card bills from another family reunion or stressed about covering Daniel's latest crisis. I walked home from school through the crisp air, my scarf wrapped snugly, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. On the last Friday of November, I hosted my first Friendsgiving. Sarah arrived with sweet potatoes Aunt Linda with pumpkin pie Mrs. Thompson with her famous apple crisp. My small apartment glowed with candles and laughter, a patchwork of people who had chosen to be there, who respected me, not for what I gave them, but for who I was. We clinked glasses, and for once I wasn't serving from the sidelines. I was at the table, equal whole. After everyone left, I sat on my couch, the quiet wrapping around me like a soft blanket. I thought of the Carter's house, probably still buzzing with resentment and whispered arguments. I pictured Daniel sulking, my parents wringing their hands, their lawyer trying to salvage the mess. I felt no longing to be there. Instead, I felt gratitude that I was here. A week later, my mother called. I stared at her name on the screen, my finger hovering. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something inside me urged me to answer. Her voice was hesitant, brittle. "Emily, I'm sorry." The words hung awkwardly foreign on her tongue. Sorry for what I asked, though I already knew. For the reunion, for Thanksgiving. Things got out of hand. I waited, letting the silence stretch. Finally, she whispered, "You'll always be my daughter." A part of me, the child inside, still aching for her mother's love, wanted to seize those words to believe them. But another part, stronger now, understood what they meant. They weren't an admission of guilt. They weren't a reversal of loyalty. They were crumbs, and I was done starving. "I'll always be your daughter, Mom," I said softly. "But I won't be your wallet. If that's what you want, then I'm afraid you've already lost me." Her silence told me everything. She had expected me to fold, to come crawling back. When I didn't, the line went dead. I placed the phone on the table and exhaled slowly, a strange mixture of sorrow and relief flooding me. In that moment, I knew there would be no fairy tale reconciliation, no sudden transformation where my parents recognized my worth. The golden child would remain golden, and I would remain the scapegoat. But that truth no longer crushed me. It freed me. Over the next months, I began to rebuild piece by piece. I met Sarah for coffee every Friday after school. I joined a painting class downtown, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time or money for. I took a weekend trip to Boston just because I wanted to see the ocean in winter. Each step was small, but together they built a new life, one where my energy fed me instead of draining me. Aunt Linda became my anchor, reminding me with every call that resilience runs in our blood, even if decency does not. Mrs. Thompson and I planted tulip bulbs in early spring, our hands numb from the cold soil, our laughter warming the air. And every time I doubted myself, James reminded me, "Emily, you already won. You exposed them. That's power they can't take back." By the time spring arrived and the tulips bloomed, I had begun to see myself differently. Not as the forgotten daughter, not as the family servant, but as a woman who had faced betrayal and chosen dignity over despair. One afternoon, I walked past a store window and caught my reflection, my posture straighter, my eyes clearer. For the first time, I smiled at the woman looking back. In May, I traveled to Chicago to visit Diana, Aunt Linda's daughter. We sat by the lake, the wind whipping our hair, sharing stories of betrayal and survival. She told me, "Sometimes you have to lose the family you thought you had to find the one you were meant to build." Her words settled deep in my chest. She was right. My family by blood had cast me out, but in their place I had gained something stronger, a chosen family built on respect, loyalty, and love, freely given. One evening, nearly a year after the reunion that broke me, I visited the park pavilion alone. It was empty, the picnic tables bare, the grass still marked with faint circles where tents had once stood. I walked to the center, where I had stood for so many photos, and closed my eyes. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the sizzle of the grill, the splash of water balloons. But instead of grief, I felt closure. I whispered into the cold air, "You tried to erase me," but I found myself instead. Then I walked away, leaving the ghosts behind. Today, I live with a freedom I once thought impossible. My paycheck goes toward my own future, my own joy. My holidays are filled with people who want me, not my money. My worth is no longer up for debate. My name is Emily Carter. I am 32 years old, and I have finally learned that family is not defined by blood, but by love, by respect, and by the courage to walk away when those are missing. They had their reunion without me, but in losing them, I reunited with myself.